Anglo-Saxon England forged a powerful new state. Its influence reached across the British Isles, but its wealth drew relentless new conquerors. Viking raids resumed with terrifying frequency. In 939, Olaf Gudfridsson reclaimed York. He ruled as Jorvik's king for 3 years. Eric Bloodaxe seized York twice, ruling briefly. This launched England's epic struggle for the crown. Legends recount a King Olaf invaded Kent in 991. His origin remains uncertain, but in the Battle of Malden, he decisively defeated the royal forces. The reigning English monarch was Athelred II, whom his contemporaries nicknamed the Unready. This term unready actually meant evil counsel, a bad plan or folly playing on his name, which originally signified noble counsel. After his army lost the battle, Athelred chose to purchase peace with silver. Unsurprisingly, this tactic did not aid Athelred the Unready. Viking raids on England persisted, and the king proved to be a poor military leader in his attempts to repel these attacks. Contemporary chronicles noted, when the Danes were in the east, the English army was in the west. If the Danes moved south, the English army was dispatched north. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides an online therapy service, assisting with a wide array of mental health challenges. There are moments when everything seems to overwhelm us simultaneously. Constant workplace stress and deadlines, plus self-doubt like, am I too needy? Or are my needs valid? And the feeling your potential is unfulfilled sparks questions like, am I truly good enough to reach my full potential? I can share my own experience. When I started this channel, I faced similar fears. Could I handle the stress? Would I possess enough knowledge, time, and energy to maintain high-quality content? Would I disappoint those who believed in me? Most importantly, am I genuinely talented enough to create truly meaningful content? These constant doubts and anxieties can be exhausting, distracting you from your true work and life. That's when I realized managing everything without professional support is difficult. Starting therapy was a decisive step for me. The BetterHelp platform helps you find the most suitable therapist within days. You complete a questionnaire, and your answers match you with a professional whose expertise best suits your needs. If the first therapist isn't the right fit, you can easily switch at no extra charge. Therapy is not a weakness. It's a step toward resolving your inner struggles. So visit the link in the description, or go to betterhelp.com/mapped to receive 10% off your first month of therapy. Don't delay caring for yourself. Start now. One such raid occurred in 994 when the Danish king Sweyn Forkbeard besieged London. Once again, Ethelred the Unready had to pay a ransom for Sweyn to depart his kingdom. Perhaps predictably, the more frequently the king paid off the Vikings, the more often they returned demanding money. In 994, he paid 10,000 pounds of silver, yet by 1002, the ransom escalated to 24,000 pounds of silver. This policy severely depleted the royal treasury. It was then Athelred decided on a different approach to deal with the Vikings. He blamed his failures on the Danes living in England since the days of the Danelaw. Unable to exact revenge on the Viking raiders for his numerous defeats, Athelred the Unready commanded the massacre of all Danes residing in England. This became known historically as the St. Brice's Day Massacre. The Scandinavian response was immediate. Sweyn Forkbeard, whose sister had been murdered in England, vowed to avenge himself upon Athelred. In 1003, he arrived with his fleet and, over the next year, conquered all of East Anglia before besieging London. Athelred faced imminent defeat, but an outbreak of plague striking England at that time saved him. Sweyn and his army were forced to leave the island. In subsequent years, Athelred paid tribute to Sweyn to maintain peace. Even so, the Danish king wasn't the sole Viking threat. In 1009, a band of Jomsvikings led by chieftain Thorkel the High landed in southern England. They raided the country for several years until Athelred chose to use the Jomsvikings against the Danish king. In 1012, he hired Thorkel the High into his service. and ceased paying tribute to Sweyn. The following year, a Danish army landed in Northumbria near Gainsborough. The local nobility swiftly swore allegiance to Sweyn, joining his forces. Sweyn then advanced south, capturing Winchester, and the Jomsvikings switched sides to join him. Ethelred the Unready still hoped to win, awaiting help from his brother-in-law, Richard II, Duke of Normandy. However, when he realized aid wouldn't arrive, he fled to Normandy. Concurrently, Sweyn Forkbeard established his rule over all of England. He then convened the Witenagemot, an assembly of English nobles, intending to be crowned king. Nevertheless, he never received the English crown, unexpectedly dying the following year. Upon hearing of Sweyn Forkbeard's death, Athelred the Unready returned to England, bringing Norman mercenaries. With these reinforcements, he quickly managed to drive out the Vikings, now led by Sweyn's younger son, Cnut. Cnut, however, did not abandon his father's plans and in 1015 assembled a new army to invade England. He quickly captured the kingdom's south. Soon after, Ethelred the Unready died, creating a significant problem for Cnut, as the English were now led by the talented military commander Prince Edmund, who earned the nickname Ironside for his bravery. Relying on support from northern English, he defeated the Vikings in several battles. During these battles, Uhtred of Bebbanburg, the Earl of Northumbria, distinguished himself with bravery, earning the nickname the Bold. Not until autumn 1016 did Cnut manage to win over the Mercian earls, and ultimately defeat Edmund in the Battle of Ascendon. Even then, Edmund didn't surrender and proposed a duel to Cnut for England's crown. Cnut refused, instead suggesting England be divided along the River Thames. The northern part would belong to him, while Edmund would rule the southern part. Yet Edmund did not govern his lands for long, as he died later that same year. By late 1016, Cnut had united all of England under his rule. To legitimize his power, he married Emma of Normandy, the previous king's wife. A year later, Cnut inherited Denmark from his brother. In 1028, he conquered Norway. This is why Cnut was called the Great, as his dominion stretched from Iceland to Gotland. Future historians would name this state the North Sea Empire. For the English, being under Cnut's rule brought no significant changes. The kingdom continued living by its old laws, with local Anglo-Saxon nobility retaining power. During this period, Earl Godwin began his rise to power, controlling nearly half of England's land. The tax system remained unchanged. The English continued paying Danegeld, money to ransom Vikings, but now directly to the royal treasury. Upon the death of Cnut the Great, all his holdings were inherited by his son with Emma of Normandy, Harthacnut. He soon faced a struggle to preserve Cnut's empire. That same year, his half-brother Harold Harefoot seized England, ruling independently for 5 years. Only after Harold's death did Harthacnut reclaim the kingdom. Norway also rebelled against Harthacnut's rule, with Magnus the Good, the previous king's son, leading their war for independence. This time, the Danish king lost the war to the Norwegians, and he and Magnus were compelled to make an agreement. If either died without heirs, the other would inherit their territories. In 1042, Harthacnut died and Scandinavia plunged into war over his inheritance. Not wanting war on their lands, the English earls proclaimed Edward the Confessor king. Edward was Harthacnut's maternal half-brother and the younger son of former king Ethelred the Unready. Edward was deeply religious, dedicating most of his life to ecclesiastical matters, which earned him his epithet. His religious commitment was so profound that, even though he was married, he remained childless. As Edward the Confessor concentrated on church affairs, Earl Godwin began to amass significant political power throughout England. He grew so influential that, on one occasion, when the king disputed with him regarding candidates for the Archbishopric of Canterbury, Godwin merely marched his forces to London's walls and compelled the king to agree to his demands. Following Godwin's demise, his immense fortune and political sway were bequeathed to his eldest son, Harold Godwinson. West Francia's kingdom was frequently assailed by Viking incursions, a fate not exclusive to England. The Vikings laid siege to Paris 4 times, withdrawing solely after a ransom was paid. To safeguard his kingdom, King Charles II the Simple conceived a unique solution. To Rollo the Walker, a prominent Viking leader, he ceded territories within the country's northern expanse, in return for his pledge to protect the kingdom from further Norse incursions. Additionally, Rollo was conferred the rank of Duke. As the French termed Vikings, Normans, Rollo's territories were subsequently named the Duchy of Normandy. The Normans swiftly assimilated into their newly acquired lands. They accepted the Christian religion. Scandinavian dialects gave way to French, and the Norsemen themselves evolved into characteristic medieval knights. Rollo's heirs went on to establish a mighty feudal lineage, whose dukes notably enlarged their territories and wielded significant influence in the kingdom's politics. Ultimately, by 1035, William II held the ducal title of Normandy. William, being an illegitimate son, was consequently often known by the moniker the Bastard. He entered the political arena at a young age, being proclaimed duke following his father's passing when he was just 7. This ignited a fierce power struggle throughout Normandy. The youthful duke was transferred between feudal lords, since his guardian held authority over the duchy. Subsequent to this, the first 4 guardians were assassinated, and William himself faced multiple assassination attempts. Unsurprisingly, William the Bastard matured to be adept in both politics and martial strategy. The youthful duke also gained a reputation for his craftiness. When he turned 20, William ensnared rebellious nobles in an ambush, decisively beating them at the Battle of Valladolid. William the Bastard earned notoriety for his ruthlessness. In 1051, when the residents of Alençon derided his ancestry, William ordered a merciless execution of half their populace. After solidifying his authority in Normandy, William started pursuing claims to different lands. He particularly set his sights on England, given that King Edward the Confessor, his cousin, had pledged to bequeath the crown to the Norman duke upon his demise. Understandably, the Anglo-Saxon nobility was reluctant to see the English crown controlled by a foreigner. Following Edward the Confessor's demise in January of 1066, at the Witnugamacht, Harold Godwinson was acclaimed as England's new king. William the Bastard commenced readying for England's subjugation. Since the Norman forces proved inadequate, he diligently enlisted mercenaries from adjacent territories. Harold Hardrada's campaign began in September 1066, after he had collected 200 vessels. The core strike force comprised 2,000 heavily armored knights on horseback. The remainder of the army comprised infantry, with a substantial contingent of archers and crossbowmen. To move these considerable forces across the English Channel, he was required to amass a fleet of 600 vessels. For the invasion's legitimacy, a story was quickly fabricated. It claimed that Harold Godwinson once embarked for France and was detained by a French count, from whom he was freed by William the Bastard's ransom. Back then, Harold, taking an oath on sacred relics, pledged his support for William's bid for the English throne. This account not only gave the Norman Duke a basis to lay claim to England, but also characterized King Harold of England as a perjurer. This was deemed a severe transgression throughout the Middle Ages. To secure additional backing for his campaign, William successfully petitioned for the Pope's endorsement of the English invasion. Despite being fully prepared, William did not rush, since he and Harold were not the sole contenders for the English throne. At this time, Norway was enduring turbulent years, and the Viking era was nearing its end. The era was ending, and centralized royal authority began to emerge. It was during this precise period that King Harald Norway Hardrada held Norway's throne. His appellation, signifying ruthless, was merited due to his harshness. He served as a hired fighter throughout his younger days in Kievan Rus and the Byzantine Empire, where he established a reputation as an accomplished military strategist and a courageous fighter. Back in his homeland, Harold achieved renown through many victories against foes, but also through plots targeting his confederates and a stern dominion over his people. Being the late king's uncle, Magnus the Good of Norway, Harald Hardrada was convinced he had acquired all of Magnus' treaties and consequently asserted a valid right to Harthacnut's throne, whose domains included England. The foundation for this was Harthacnut's vow to Magnus. If Harthacnut perished heirless, his territories would transfer to the Norwegian monarch. Consequently, Harald Hardrada also asserted a right to the English throne. By spring of 1066, a messenger reached him from Tostig Godwinson, sibling to the newly crowned English King Harold. Tostig, once the ruler of Northumbria, shared Harald Hardrada's ruthless disposition toward his subjects, a factor that eventually caused his banishment from England. He nursed a grievance against his brother and sought out confederates. Seeking retribution, Tostig himself put forth the notion of a Norse invasion of England, and he secured King Harald Hardrada's endorsement to begin the campaign. Harald Hardrada commenced his campaign in September 1066, having amassed a fleet of 200 ships. While en route to England, he made a halt at the Orkney Islands, gaining additional troops from native Norsemen, thereby swelling his fleet with an extra 100 vessels. His forces comprised approximately 10,000 soldiers. Close to the River Tyne, Tostig Godwinson and Harold formed an alliance. Even with Tostig contributing merely 12 vessels, his guidance was invaluable across Northumbria. Moreover, Tostig notified Harold that his sibling, King Harold Godwinson, alongside the main English force, was encamped in the southern area, expecting the Norman incursion. Moving up the Humber River, the Norwegians at the Battle of Fulford conquered the local troops commanded by Morcar of Northumbria, and then captured York, which they employed as a base from which to launch their incursions throughout Northumbria. At this juncture, Harald Hardrada's attention lay more on pillaging English territories than upon tactical combat. Thus, Harold Godwinson's arrival with his army caught him completely unprepared. For him, the Norwegian and English forces engaged on the plains near Stamford Bridge. Tradition holds that, prior to the engagement, the Norwegians inquired what the English monarch would grant Harald Hardrada for his departure England amicably. Harold countered that he would only allow him 7 feet of English soil, signaling the Norwegian king's demise. In the ensuing clash, the Norwegians occupied a superior vantage, since they held the bridge. Nevertheless, the Norwegians were caught unready for combat, with many not even opportunity to put on their mail. Thus, the English rapidly pierced their defensive line, initially overcoming the bridge's protectors, and later assaulting the main army's encampment. The English swiftly overcame even the Norse reinforcements that emerged from a nearby garrison. The English, during the clash, both King Harald Hardrada of Norway and the English king's brother Tostig Godwinson lost their lives, and the Norwegians commenced a retreat, only to be unsparingly cut down by the English. However, Harald Godwinson was unable to celebrate his victory for long. Mere days later, he was informed of Duke William of Normandy's disembarkation in southern England. Harold and his troops swiftly advanced southward, achieving about 40 kilometers of travel each day. The nucleus of Harold's English army comprised the Fyrd, a foot soldier militia. The English mounted troops, comprised of noble housecarls, nonetheless opted to fight on foot. Consequently, the English army fought using their famed shield wall tactic. The method had been refined during confrontations with the Vikings and demonstrated great efficacy during the Battle of Stamford Bridge. However, the English shield wall had not encountered armored cavalry from Europe previously. Harold knew well that occupying the higher terrain was essential to defend against cavalry. Given this, upon the confrontation of the armies at Hastings on October 14, 1066, Harold stationed his troops atop a rise. This tactical choice provided the English with a major benefit. The initial Norman assault met with no success. All following attacks similarly proved fruitless. William the Bastard understood that securing a win was impossible, while the English maintained their hold on the elevated ground. Consequently, he utilized a deceptive tactic anew. As dusk fell, he dispatched his foot soldiers, primarily mercenaries, for an additional assault. After their attempt similarly faltered, he then pretended to withdraw. The English, convinced that triumph was within reach, charged down the slope to eliminate the Normans. At that spot they faced the Norman knightly cavalry, who executed a powerful assault, fracturing the English ranks. Subsequently, the Norman foot soldiers entered the fray as well. The battle claimed the lives of Harold Godwinson and his two siblings. William the Bastard eventually attained triumph. Yet, winning this fight did not imply William could instantly bring the whole land under his control. As the fierce fighting at Hastings progressed, Edgar Atheling, a grandson of Edmund Ironside, a figure who previously defied Cnut the Great, was announced as England's new sovereign in London. Yet, his monarchical power was limited solely to the urban center. Upon William the Bastard's arrival with his troops, he initiated a siege of the city. Through torching the peripheral areas and menacing its destruction, he compelled the residents to unbar the entryways. Edgar became a captive. William the Bastard's coronation transpired at Westminster Abbey on December 25, 1066, Christmas Day. From that point onward, he would historically assume the title of King William I, also recognized as William the Conqueror. However, even his ascension to the throne did not proceed without issue. During the Duke's crowning, his men grew suspicious of a plot among the English. A bloodbath ensued, and was soon succeeded by a conflagration that engulfed the abbey. This forced William, fresh from his crowning, to escape the blazing edifice. Following this, William named 2 regents to administer England during his unavailability. He then went back to his native country. Immediately following William's departure for Normandy, unrest erupted in his English holdings. A revolt emerged in the Western Territories, under the command of Adric the Wild. His true identity remains a mystery for modern historians. Furthermore, the residents of Exeter also took up arms. Concurrently, Harold Godwinson's sons journeyed from Ireland, disembarking in Bristol, intending to avenge their father's passing, and to combat the Normans. As 1067 drew to a close, William the Conqueror was compelled to go back to the island for restoring peace. William first quashed the uprising in Exeter, severely penalizing the local inhabitants. Subsequently, his army triumphed over Harold Godwinson's sons at the Battle of Bleeden, forcing them to fall back to Ireland. At the same time, William received additional distressing tidings. Edgar Atheling had broken free from capture and escaped to Scotland, there forging a compact with Danish assistance, poised to disembark in Northumbria. Concurrently, an uprising had already erupted within Northumbria, under the command of Morcar of Northumbria and his sibling Edwin of Mercia. Afterward, William proceeded north. Along the journey, within the rebellious earls' territories, he established Warwick Castle, then parceled out their properties among his knights. These tactics demonstrated their efficacy, since shortly afterward, Morcar and Edwin deserted insurgent Northumbria and made amends with William. The insurrection was promptly quelled, and the monarch designated Robert de Comyn, a Norman count, to rule the northern areas. As William waged war in England's north, the sons of Harold Godwinson arrived in the southern lands another time. They occupied Devonshire, intending to then proceed to London from there, only to be overcome by regional Norman battalions in the Battle of Northam. William was informed of this loss during his journey, while he intended to suppress them. Simultaneously, he found out that an uprising had recurred in Northumbria, and Earl Robert de Comyn had been executed by fire at the hands of the insurgent English. Edgar Atheling also eventually made his way there, and a Danish naval group was hastening to his assistance. William found it necessary to journey north once more, and initially, the Normans achieved victory. Beyond York's defensive barriers, William overcame the revolting Northumbrians and took the urban area. Yet, once the Danish contingent appeared, William was compelled to fall back swiftly, as Edgar Atheling gained command of Northumbria. Afterward, William, for the second time, turned to deceptive tactics. He delayed until the Danes and English began to argue internally, and at that point he gave a payment to the Danish king, resulting in the Danes departing the island. Edgar Atheling was then short on sufficient soldiers. Thus he took refuge in Scotland once he was apprised that William the Conqueror initiated his march northward. Upon the Norman army's arrival in Northumbria, they executed a bloody purge, methodically eliminating all settlements. Conditions became so dire that the York Valley was rendered a desolate, barren land. Folklore states that a baron of William the Conqueror posed a query to the monarch concerning his cruelty, asking his reason for such severity, for the northern populace would bear it in mind. The monarch countered that their remembrance would be beneficial, because it would dissuade them from revolting. Simultaneously, across the newly acquired territories, William the Conqueror initiated the erection of fortresses, granting them to his vassals, and commenced establishing Norman residents on the Isle. Among his constructions, the Tower of London stands as the most notable fortress. Owing to recurring rebellions, the new sovereign started acquiring property from the local aristocracy and reassigning it among his subordinates. This denoted the initiation of characteristic European feudalism for England, where the Norman elite, mostly French-speaking, formed the central part of the monarchy's feudal upper class. Even so, English feudal practices would exhibit particular traits. Given that William's vassals mostly bore the title of baron, England's principal feudal lords would also bear this designation. In Europe, conversely, a baron normally represented a minor landholder. Conversely, within England, this designation grew to mean a strong, rich feudal noble. During 1070, at the Stafford Battle, William the Conqueror prevailed against Edric the Wild. Afterward, Edric offered his loyalty to him, and even took part in later battles on behalf of the English monarch. Edgar Atheling, perhaps still hopeful to continue his struggle against William, saw his prospects vanish in 1072 when William invaded Scotland, compelling the Scottish king to expel Edgar. Edgar then journeyed to France seeking allies, but his vessel was caught in a tempest. Thereupon, Edgar settled differences with William, formally accepted him as England's monarch, then submitted his oath of fealty. Nevertheless, English defiance failed to finish with Edgar Atheling. Amidst the wetlands of Ely's Isle, Hereward the Wake, quite possibly an English nobility, sought asylum. Employing irregular warfare, he maintained his resistance to the Norman invaders up to 1072. Regardless of William the Conqueror's victory over all resisting English battalions, fresh obstacles lay before him. In 1075, William the Conqueror confronted an insurgency originating from his personal Norman barons, who had acquired considerable wealth and property within subjugated England, and now reluctant to continue their service to the monarch. The Earl's revolt was put down without the monarch's direct active intervention, but it provoked the arrival of a Danish armada. The Danes intended to capitalize on the insurrection for their individual advantage and to pillage the English domains. William, for another occasion, was obliged to voyage towards England. When news of his advent reached them, the Danes promptly withdrew, aiming to consolidate Norman authority in England. Spanning the years 1085 to 1086, William the Conqueror began the inaugural wide-ranging enumeration for English records. This extensive count was named the Domesday Book, for to the average English citizens, such an examination prompted thoughts of the apocalypse, a phenomenon that, according to Christian tenets, would conclude with the final condemnation of the wicked. This register itemized specific particulars concerning the property owned by all English nobility, while most English agricultural workers were designated as subservient serfs beneath the feudal aristocracy. Only in England's northern regions did a few minority of autonomous commoners called yeomen persisted. The Norman subjugation represented the concluding phase in the establishment of the English nation. While over an extensive period, the Norman elite maintained distinct living arrangements from the general English population, speaking in the French tongue. As time progressed, the conquerors and conquered started to intermingle. The Normans imported a multitude of French terms into the English lexicon, whereas the English populace steadily integrated the Norman contingent. Within 2 centuries, these Norman aristocrats fully embraced their English identity. Thanks.